Well, the top 7 risks to keep on your radar here in 2026. Today, we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon and welcome to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'm your host, Bob Brooks. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. Well, if you have a question for me, I want to make sure that you know where to go to get your questions answered. And like most radio shows, this is not a scenario where you go write your question down and it goes into a big black hole. We actually do answer all the questions that come into the website. So go to the website, prudentmoney.com. And you'll go up to the link that says Ask Prudent Money. Enter in there, put in your question, get it to us. We'll get you taken care of. That's our number one priority, and making sure you're taken care of. Have your opinions, your comments. We love it all. So just to go to prudentmoney.com, and you know the drill. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Hope you can put up with my voice a little bit today. I'm having some issues with it, I guess this time of year. But hopefully we'll make it through the next 25 minutes together. First thing I want to talk about, I mentioned it yesterday. I want to mention it again. Not going to mention it every show going forward, but just want to mention it while we're still here around the beginning of the year, is that it's time to make sure you've got all your ducks in a row, that you're established with a good foundation with your stewardship and a good foundation with your investments. You know where everything is. You've made the most important call, and I got a little bit of bias there, but one of the most important calls that you can make today is to your advisor or whomever helps you with your investments and your money and your financial questions that you have. It's time to do it today. Now, I'll admit something. I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I'll admit something. It is a process that I have to force myself to do. Yes, because I got to do it for myself as well, and make sure that we're spending money in the right places. Make sure that my wife and I are on the same page. Make sure that there are not a bunch of things I signed up for and don't use and could get rid of. Make sure that all the investments are in the right place, the right allocations, the right strategy. And I don't like doing it. I will be the first to admit to it. I also know the importance of it. I also know that, and I'll tell you this, is that once I have it done, it's in the best of moods. It's all done, all set, and I feel very good, very confident. And it's such a stewardship issue. It's such a step that you take that says, I'm all in. And I think it is a big, big stewardship issue. So make sure that you have that taken care of. If you're in a situation where you don't have a financial advisor, you're always welcome to send me an email. Just go to info@prudentmoney.com or go to the website, prudentmoney.com, and say, hey, I want to talk with you about my situation. Am I doing the right things? We're here for that. And that's a very important part of the ministry that we do. So all that said, make sure you make that first important phone call and get online with your advisor or whomever and get that taken care of. Because here's what happens, is that if you wait, it'll turn into a couple weeks, it'll turn into a couple of months, it'll turn into a quarter, it'll turn into a half a year, and then we'll be at the end of the year, and you'll say, man, I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have it's, life with regrets. So we don't want that. And that's why I always talk about and put so much emphasis on the beginning of the year. And that really includes, if you can get everything done by the end of January, up and running. I think that's a great goal to shoot for. One of the things we're going to talk about, not today, but we're going to talk about here coming up soon, is what are your goals for this year? What didn't work last year for you? What mistakes did you make? And, this applies to me as well. Just because I'm talking to you on the radio doesn't mean I don't have a financial life. I don't have goals and things that I want for my family. Most importantly, things that I want to put stewardship up there, number one. And do I always do it? I fight to do it. But I know what you're going through, and I also know that at the end of the process, it's just such a great feeling. And for me, that's what I got to focus on. So by the end of January, we'll be talking about this. We'll talk about, I think, Monday. I've got it planned out. Tomorrow, as every Friday, is the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. It's when Tony Joe comes on the air with me and answers those car questions that you could have. And I've seen him solve so many problems. I've known him for, over almost 25 years. And I've done radio with him for almost 25 years. And it's just amazing what he knows and what he understands. And he didn't have any computer in front of him when he's answering these questions. He just has, this is the great thing about Tony Joe, and I'll go on. But the good thing about Tony Joe is that he knows old school what to do, old school how to fix things. And he's keeping up with the technology, but there's just so much you need to know, and he's got such a great working knowledge of it. So he'll be on Fridays, of course. And if you're just listening in, last year in December or November, I think in November, we changed over from the 3:30 slot to the 4:30 slot, and that's where we're doing the programs. We've been doing the Prudent Money radio show since January of 2002, which is hard to believe. Yes, I am that old. And just so pumped for this year and what this year brings. And but we gotta stay on top of risk. And if there's anything that amounts to a very big issue, a stewardship issue, is being in tune with what's risky and how much risk is developing out there in the environment that we have to work with. Now, this doesn't mean that I'm asking you to start reading things and start trying to predict things and forecast things. We're not doing that. I mean, I talk about what's on the risk scale, but at the end of the day, it's all about how this affects your retirement, how this affects your investment performance. And, the reality of it is we have not seen a bear market cycle since 2007, where the S&P 500, our stock market, lost in excess of 50%. I'm sure a lot of you remember this, but that's just way back in the past. So I'm not suggesting that you go bury yourself in a hole somewhere and put everything into cash and hunker down. I'm just saying be aware of what's happening. And at the end of the day, you have to be able to determine, I'd say on a quarterly basis, am I in the right risk allocations? And we'll talk about that. But am I in the right risk allocations, and make sure that you are comfortable with the risk that you're taking. Now, when I do a workshop, a beginning of the year workshop, and I'm not counting that out, we may actually be able to pull that off this year. Might be a little bit later than beginning of the year, but I think that with what's going on today, there will be more things to talk about probably by then. But I think it's important to look at the list that we're going to talk about today. And I went through some of this yesterday, but I'm going to start over and walk through what we've talked through just briefly, then catch up with what we need to finish with. I came back and I redid the list, and I come up with 7 risks to keep on your radar. Now, I will be the first one to admit it is tough to do today. And the reason it's tough to do is because it seems like every day there's something new with this administration. They're doing something else. They're signing executive orders right and left. They're saying, no, you can't do that. We're going to do this. We're going to take this over. implement this. And I have a running file of what's changing sitting in my computer, and it just blows me away. So here, let's start with the top 7 risks, and we'll be talking about these things and focusing on them, and ask the question, do these events that are occurring right now, are they going to negatively affect the earnings and or profits of a company and the market in general? Because you see, that's what you've got. Wall Street that watches closely is the taking over of Venezuela and everything that's going on attached with that. Will that affect negatively or positively earnings? What the company makes. You see, every quarter, we'll just say ABC Company. Every quarter, ABC Company, which is a fiction, I don't know if there is actually an ABC Company. This is only used as an example. ABC Company comes out and says, we forecast we're going to earn this, $2 a share, $1 a share, whatever it is. And they come out and they display their results and it's -1. Well, that stock is going to dramatically drop, probably because Wall Street was expecting a good quarter and didn't get it. And so then they want to look at how things look going forward. And it better be in line with what Wall Street thinks, or the stock will get sold and investors will lose money. And you get enough of that happening and you have a real problem. We'll get to that in just a second. This is Bob Brooks. Listen, I'm up against a break. Stick around. More to come. We'll be right back. Hello, this is Bob Brooks. Proverbs 22:3 and Proverbs 27:12 are the exact same verse word for word. I call them the stewardship verses of risk. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. On the Prudent Money Radio Show, we teach about risk, how to identify it, how to figure it out, and what to do about it. We believe that to be a prudent steward, you have to be a good risk manager. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show on Bible School Radio 91.3. Prudent Money, home of the modern-day steward movement.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
This is Rob Randall, your host and teacher of the Invisible War radio program. The Invisible War is the study of God's Word on how to walk in Christ's victory and the spiritual battles we face against the powers of darkness. Join me every Sunday morning at 9 right here on KDKR and KYJC in Commerce, your station for life.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know I really do appreciate it. Listen, if you got a question for me, go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Go to the top of the page and go to Ask Prudent Money. Click that link. We'll be back with you and take care of you, whatever you need. Talking about the 7 top risks to keep on your radar. The first one is, whatever these risks are, do these risks affect my investment? So if they affect ABC Company, which we're talking about, then they probably affect your investments. And so this is why I believe all these spectacular and sensational things that come on. And you got to remember this about what has happened is that if you look back into other administrations, there have been military operations. There have been people taken out of countries. There have been all kinds of things that have happened. But they happen under the veil of midnight. They happen very, very, you just kind of find out that they've happened. It's no big flashy display of power. With President Trump, we're going to get this part of the marketing that and it's true, that America is a powerhouse, a military powerhouse, and we want what we want, and we'll get it, whatever we want to get. And so that's why you had like 150 fighter planes or some fighter jets or whatever it was. It's a big display of power, and that's how he rolls. I mean, that's not a shock to anybody, I'm sure, but that's how he does what he does. He puts on a demonstration that just did not happen in the past, and everything was very low key. So that makes it, that sensationalizes it a little bit more, and then the sheer number of, we talked about this, the sheer number of things, is that going to affect what you're investing into? And generally speaking, is it going to affect the overall financial environment? And I think that the market is reacting kind of in the middle. It's not doing much. It's not going up as much. It's kind of been stagnating. So we'll see. So that's the first risk. The second one, we just mentioned it, is geopolitical. And this is what is happening with all the countries we are threatening, we are claiming, we're trying to claim. But did you ever think you'd see a day where we just all of a sudden we overtake Venezuela, and the Congress is trying to get some control back into the situation? But I think that the biggest problem is that most presidents leading up to Trump would speak a harsh tone and really do nothing. And they leave it to talking through it and trying to do it peacefully. He is going to be that president that, I mean, as you know, that's going to speak militarily, and he's going to follow through with what he says he's going to do. And I think they're starting to figure that out. But he's making some huge demands on Venezuela. We'll see what happens. This could be that negotiation situation where he comes out with a very hard line and backs off. Who knows? But this involves China. This involves Russia. This involves Cuba. This involves Mexico. But he wants Venezuela to cut ties, and they all buy a lot of oil from Venezuela. And this is about oil and about leverage. So from there, once again, you could look at it and go, "Wow, that was spectacular! Look what Trump did. Market's going to tank." Maybe not. Does it really affect earnings? I mean, it probably affects oil companies, obviously, but that is kind of where we are with that, and we'll see going forward how that pans out. The other problem is inflation. It's still an issue, and this is the and I'll talk a little bit about interest rates and with this, but inflation is still a real risk. Tough to say from government released economic reports if how legit some of these are, but I know that when I go to the grocery store, it feels pretty legit. So I don't know whatever the government is talking about, but inflation is a real problem. And what's interesting is that tariffs, which would be another line item, don't hear hardly anything about that anymore. So I don't know what that means. The Supreme Court was supposed to rule on whether or not he had the ability and the authority to do that, to implement tariffs. And gosh, that was back in September, October when that was announced. And so far, I guess they're still talking about it. So if he comes back, if the Supreme Court comes back and rules against Trump, that's going to be real interesting. If they don't rule against Trump, that's going to be real interesting too, because you're going to see I think you'll see quite a bit of inflation lighten up the economy. So tariffs definitely one, inflation definitely one, the economy as a whole. You know, there was a time there last year when things started getting kind of dicey, but it's kind of backed off a little bit. It's kind of had stable, not too hot, not too cold, and we'll see where it goes. Interest rates. It is so very important to get the interest rates back moving again, moving down. Everything's tied to the to interest rates. We're looking at the 10-year Treasury bond yield or interest rate. And what's supposed to happen is if the Federal Reserve Board says interest rates should come down, then that bond, the interest rate on that bond comes down, and then it affects real estate, it affects consumer spending, consumer goods, everything. The problem is that, as we've talked about, and we'll continue to talk about because I want you to see this, is that interest rates continue to stay steady or go up. That's locking up the mortgage real estate market, the mortgages, the real estate markets, and used cars, new cars, anything that's got debt applied to it. So it's not acting right. So we need to keep a close eye on that. The stock market cycle. Think of a big circle, and this is something that if we do a workshop, this is worth coming just to see this, because a lot of people, a lot of advisors don't really buy into this. But it's the markets go in a cycle. Look at it as a big circle, and they go through these bad times. We haven't gone through a bad time in a very, very long time, as I was talking about. So if the market goes down and goes down significantly, say 20, 25%, like it did in 2022, is it going to bounce back like it did in 2022 and go forward and go much higher? Or is it going to continue to go down like it did in 2008 for whatever reason? So one's called, we'll keep this debate for another time. I'm going to call it a correction. One was a correction where the market lost, I think, 22% in 2022, I believe. Or is it much worse than that? Is it going to develop into something that, and I think it would take some type of war, or when I say war, maybe cyber related. I can't imagine a war in the United States. Of course, could imagine a war outside the United States. But the stock market cycle is moving, and where are we on that cycle? We're at the top. I think we are, and I think the only place to go at this point is down. Not to be trying to be a Debbie Downer or anything. It's just that is what risk is. That's the way markets normally handle themselves, and they work. So you want to keep that on the. You want to definitely keep that on the radar. The other thing we're looking at is the valuations of stocks. If stocks are too expensive, at some point investors realize that and they start selling. Stocks are as expensive today as they were in 1999, where the S&P 500 lost a little bit over 50% between 1999 and 2002, the tech bust, and 1929. Now that's a big claim, but if you have not listened to my video with the New York Times best-selling author Andrew Sorkin, you've got to do that, and that's on whatever site you listen to your podcasts. We should be there. Just Google it, and he has a whole book about 1929 and what happened. And that is something that I think as an investor, and a steward of what God's given you, really need to get a good feel for how that all works. And the stock market cycle is very, very important to understand. And, this affects whether it's a correction or a change in cycle is what we're looking at. So keep that in mind. We also need to talk a little bit about debt, a lot about debt, how and how much more that the politicians are wanting to spend, and what that means, and that really rounds it up. I don't want to jump into that at the end, right at the end of the program. $38.5 trillion is the big number we're looking at. We'll talk a little bit more about that. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at prudentmoney.com and send it in, because we are all out of time. Till we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.